APAC-TWNIC engagement
forum. Today's forum will begin in 3 minutes. Please kindly take your seats. Please also remember to put your mobile phone on silent or on vibrate mode.
Simultaneous interpretation service is available throughout the conference this morning. If you require such service, interpreting headset and receiver is available at the reception desk outside. Please select Channel 1 for Chinese. In addition, in line with the CDC protocol, please remember to wear your face mask at all times during the event. Thank you very much for your cooperation. 各位贵宾，大家早安！我们今天的活动即将在3分钟后正式开始。我们请贵宾尽速就座，也请记得将手机转为静音或者是震动的模式。另外，在活动进行的期间，也请记得全程佩戴口罩。感谢各位贵宾的配合。也提醒各位贵宾，我们稍后在活动正式开始之后呢，将全程以英语进行。这2天上午的场次备有中英同步口译的服务。如果需要使用同步口译的设备，请凭身份证件至场外租借。中文请选第1频道，谢谢。Today's event will begin very shortly. Please kindly take your seats. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning from Taiwan. Welcome to the 3rd ICANN APAC-TWNIC Engagement Forum with the 37th TWNIC IP Open Policy Meeting. Today's forum is jointly organized by ICANN, the Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers, and TWNIC, Taiwan Network Information Center, with the support from NCC, National Communications Commission. This forum serves as a platform for different stakeholders to have regular exchange of information and to have in-depth discussions on IP policies, management mechanisms, network technology research, as well as industry development. Today, we are very honored to be joined by so many distinguished guests on site and online, and we look forward to a fruitful discussion today. To kick off today's forum, first of all, please welcome Dr. Cerf, father of the Internet, for his opening remarks. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dr. Cerf.
Hello, my name is Cerf. I'm Vice President and Chief Internet Evangelist at Google. I wish I could join you at the Taiwan NIC and ICANN meetings, but in these days of no travel, that's not going to work. So you'll have to put up with a kind of virtual greeting. But I do want to thank you and tell you how important it is for the work that you're doing to be done. We know that the proper management of unique identifiers of the internet, the domain names and the internet addresses, are vital to the successful functioning of the internet. And so working together to sort out issues arising, problems in policy, and things of that kind that typically come up in the ICANN context are really important. And so your time and energy are so much appreciated by all of us who hope for a continued and successful expansion of the internet, its access and its utility. As you must know, internet is still less than 100% deployed around the world. And there are many, many issues arising right now in the use of this platform. So although many of those issues are outside of the ambit of ICANN's focus of attention, I'm sure that many of you will be thinking about that and trying to figure out how to make the internet a safer and more effective place in which to work. So again, let me thank you for your time and energy. I look forward to a day when we can actually see each other face to face. But in the meantime, maybe I'll see you on the net.
Thank you very much, Dr. Vinton, for your opening remarks. Next, please welcome Mr. Andrew Sullivan, President and Chief Executive Officer of the Internet Society, to say a few words. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Sullivan.
Hello, friends and colleagues. I'm Andrew Sullivan, President and CEO of the Internet Society. I'm sorry I cannot be with you at this third ICANN APAC-TWNIC engagement forum, but I send my warm regards on behalf of the Internet Society. Forums like this one and the TWNIC Open Policy Meeting combined with it are important events to remind us of the nature of the Internet. It is not a single system, but many systems working together. That is one of the many ways the Internet is a deeply human technology. This all works because of the way organizations like the Internet Engineering Task Force produce the open standards that allow us all to follow common protocols. Those protocols allow interoperation without a lot of central control. The Internet works too because of the common identifiers and the single routing system that we get due to bodies like ICANN and TWNIC. Without that lightweight coordination, combined with mutual interoperation, we do not get the marvelous benefits of the Internet. Even the work of securing the Internet depends on that kind of collaboration. The mutually agreed norms for routing security, or Manners project, is one such collaborative effort, and one where we are grateful for the participation and support from so many of you. In the present age, it is easy for some people to focus on the dangers that sometimes seem to arise from the Internet. Yet the dangers are largely the failure of people, and not of the technology itself. We people forget too easily the many benefits that come from the Internet. Our forgetfulness allows us to quickly see only the challenges and to overlook the marvel of people from many different parts of the globe collaborating and sharing across time, space, and cultures. That is why I believe the engagement you seek in this forum represents a contribution to the Internet Society's vision for now and for always. The Internet is for everyone. Have a good meeting.
Thank you very much, Mr. Andrew Sullivan, for your remarks. Ladies and gentlemen, next, please welcome Mr. Jia-Rong, Vice President of Stakeholder Engagement and Managing Director at APAC-ICANN, for his remarks.
Again, taking this opportunity to welcome everyone to the third ICANN APAC-TWNIC Engagement Forum. We have a lot of people joining us both on site in Taiwan as well as remotely, and I'm grateful for everybody to take the time. And we have a lot of distinguished guests and speakers. I'd like to address each of you by name, but I only have 5 minutes. So hopefully next year I will get to see you in person when we organize this again. So you see my office name, ICANN Asia Pacific, right up at the title of this forum. I want to take this opportunity to thank my friend, TWNIC CEO, Yau-Hwang, for his partnership and shared vision. The DNS community, we are fast becoming, if not already, unsung heroes keeping the internet together and working. I think Andrew Sullivan's remarks earlier kind of alluded to very similar things. Right now, for our community, we are drowned out by the more hyped up keywords like, metaverse or Web 3.0. There's 5 billion people using the internet that we work so hard to maintain. And very, very few of these 5 billion people even know that we exist. But it's okay. We're not in this job for the glamour. My wife tells me it's hard to find another job as meaningful as mine. Of course, my wife doesn't need a reason to be right. She just needs because she's my wife. But it's true, we help people enjoy the benefits of the internet. And you see that a lot more, especially in the past 2 years with the pandemic. And the DNS really is a miracle. It's a decentralized space comprising different markets, all somehow finding their ways to work together with nobody orchestrating behind the scenes, but everything works. But we can't take this for granted as well. And that's where forums like this, the ICANN APAC TWNIC Engagement Forum, that's where we come in for our community to come together, to exchange views, and find ways to collaborate. And this forum in its 3rd year now has grown a lot with different tracks all coming together, making this forum a key discussion platform. And I'm very proud of it. And again, thankful to TWNIC for your partnership. So within this forum now, we have the TWNIC IP Open Policy meeting with APAC-TWNIC's partnership. We have TW-CERT, and also the security track. We have TW-IGF and TW-SIG all coming together. So again, a big thank you also to our co-organizers and partners all coming together to make this forum a success. So also taking this opportunity to thank our sponsors, Google, CSC, Trend Micro, and CHT Security. I'm hoping that we will be able to work together even more closely as we look ahead. So I'm looking forward to an exciting and fruitful discussion over the next 2 days. And thank you for joining the forum. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Loh, for your remarks. And thank you for taking time to join us today. Ladies and gentlemen, next, please welcome Mr. Paul Wilson, Director General of Asia Pacific Network Information Center, to say a few words. Mr. Paul Wilson, the floor is yours.
Good morning. Hello, I hope you can hear me. I'm Paul from APAC-TWNIC. Very good morning to many good friends and colleagues who are joining this gathering today. I'm sorry not to be with you in Taipei this time, but maybe next time. Firstly, I want to give a huge congratulations to TWNIC and to ICANN on this 3rd joint engagement forum. Thanks to ICANN for your presence and your activities in the Asia-Pacific region, because this is a really significant event. It's got some very important guests and speakers and a great program of content for the next 2 days. So I really recommend everyone to stay and experience this. I want to also acknowledge that this is the occasion not just of the 3rd engagement forum, but of TWNIC's 37th OPM or Open Policy meeting. And that really deserves a mention because it represents so clearly the long and consistent work of TWNIC in promoting internet development in Taiwan over so many years. This OPM, it's an institution, as Jia-Rong mentioned, it's an institution within the RAR communities, within the APAC-TWNIC community in the Asia-Pacific region, as the place for community-based development of number resource management policies. That's for the establishment and evolution of the policies and the practices that are actually critical, really critical to the healthy development of the internet in Taiwan, in the Asia Pacific, and across the world. The policies are the core business of the Open Policy meeting, and they, in our context, they exist mainly at the level or the layer of IP network infrastructure of ISPs and network operators. So the policies relate to IP addresses themselves, and also to related issues like routing and routing security, like the transition of the internet to the IPv6 addressing system, to healthy operational practices among the networks, peering, interconnection, traffic exchange, and these sorts of things. And the critical thing about these policies and practices, they apply at the specific layer of the internet, but they apply to that specific layer, but they can't be developed in a vacuum inside that layer. They're intimately connected with the operational realities of the internet, firstly, with what's actually happening on the internet today. And they also interact in some way or other with the higher and lower layers of the overall internet environment, from the physical layer, the link layer at the bottom, right up through the applications, the content, the policy, and even the regulatory layers of the internet. And that's why I think TWNIC's efforts to broaden the audience and the participation in this event, to expand it into this much broader engagement forum, they're so important and commendable, because it recognises that in some way we're all in this together, and we can't build a safe and secure modern internet infrastructure without this level of engagement, of cross-fertilisation throughout this broader internet community. And this forum really is, it's a great example and a model for others to follow, even though, as I've said, it sort of is centred around something that's quite a specific technical set of technical policies and practices at the IP level. So I think the meeting really does reflect TWNIC's role in the whole Asia-Pacific region. The meeting, this event dovetails into the regional policy process of the APAC-TWNIC community, and in turn, the global communities, so that, in fact, the TW community, the internet community here, can interact in that process, can participate and bring its voice to bear in the region and more widely. And TWNIC, I have to say, is outstanding in its role within this community in actively engaging and facilitating this process for the community itself, and not as an activity simply of TWNIC or of Taiwan. So I want to give that thanks and acknowledgement for its active role. Also for, I have to say, for TWNIC's contributions to APAC-TWNIC, to the APAC-TWNIC Open Policy Meeting. TWNIC people participate actively in APAC-TWNIC, providing one of the co-chairs of our regional Open Policy Meeting, that's Ching-Heng Koo, the Director of the IP Department at TWNIC. TWNIC provides a chair for our cooperation SIG, and that's Joy Chan, the Deputy CEO of TWNIC. And also, of course, the current treasurer and a long-standing member of the APAC-TWNIC governing board, the EC, in our old friend Kenny Huang. So on top of this, we work together, APAC-TWNIC and TWNIC, with others on technical training and many activities towards the development of the internet. And I'm very happy and glad to see that this continues so strongly, particularly after this long period of a very different way of working through COVID. So I'll finish there. Again, thanks to all involved, the sponsors included, to the other panelists and presenters, and to those who've joined this meeting face-to-face or remote. I really hope you do, as I will, enjoy the next couple of days. And I hope to be back to Taipei soon. For now, I'll hand it back to the MC. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wilson. We look forward to seeing you in Taiwan very soon.
Indeed.
Next, please welcome Ms. Audrey Tang, Minister with a portfolio at the Executive Yuan, for her remarks.
Chairman Yuh-Jye of TWNIC, VP and APAC Managing Director Jia-Rong of ICANN, Commissioner Wei-Chung of National Communications Commission, Dr. Vinton Cerf, Edmon Zhong, and Akinori Maimura-san from the ICANN board, Andrew Sullivan from the Internet Society, Paul Wilson from APAC-TWNIC, esteemed experts, ladies, gentlemen, and non-binary friends, the local time. It is my great pleasure to be here virtually at the third ICANN APAC-TWNIC Engagement Forum and the 37th TWNIC IP Open Policy Meeting organized by the TWNIC and the ICANN. In preparing this video, I checked the event program, and I couldn't agree more of the event starting from the fundamental nature of the Internet to address the issues of Internet governance. These issues are highly related to Taiwan's national goals, both domestically, enhancing our nation's cybersecurity resilience, and globally, ensuring an Internet that is truly open and fosters competition, privacy, and respect for human rights. As a partner and signatory to the Declaration for the Future of Internet this April, we are committed to put more focus on the multi-stakeholder model on Internet resources allocation, cybersecurity, as well as infrastructure development. And with shared reality and distributed ledger technologies becoming the hot topics in the modern world, soon the Internet may empower all of us to live in a world where the physical and the virtual worlds are seamlessly intertwined. But while embracing unprecedented connectivity, we are inevitably facing the negative undercurrents, technology that bolsters authoritarian surveillance and corrodes democratic institutions. While democracies are fighting back with regulation, this conflict is not inevitable. 7 years ago, when Uber arrived in Taiwan, its presence was divisive, just as it has been in much of the world. But rather than letting the antisocial corners of social media pouring fuel on the flame, we adopted a multi-stakeholder policy-making process with thoughtful, deliberative conversations involving thousands of participants on how ride-hailing should be regulated. We harnessed tools for digital democracy to cluster opinion, allowing every participant to quickly digest the clearest articulation of the viewpoints of their fellow citizens and then contribute back their own thoughts. And the views that drew support from across the initial lines of division rose to the top, forming a rough consensus that was swiftly turned into running code, including software and legal code. In Taiwan, the characters for digital and plural are the same, 数位. Data altruism allows our civic tech community to co-create a plurality of services, from pollution monitoring to distribution of masks and rapid tests. Open and reliable payment systems allow creative forms of crowdfunding to support public goods. Peer-to-peer reputation systems empower civil society to combat disinformation, often with humor over rumor, while maintaining our vibrant free speech. Indeed, the Internet began as an experiment with such decentralized designs, yet the vision of its founders like J.C.R. Licklider, on which ours is closely modeled, it was just partially realized. And today, we have the chance to build a future where technologies express and empower these important ideals rather than degrading them. And to accomplish this vision, we need joint efforts from industry and academic peers to take part in digital democracy, to make our tools serve our values, not the other way around. And with this, I wish the two-day forum a great success, with fruitful collections of valuable perspectives for both international and local community members. Thank you for listening. Live long and prosper.
Thank you very much, Minister Tang, for your remarks. Ladies and gentlemen, next, we would like to invite Mr. Yau-Hwang, Minister without portfolio at the Executive Yuan, for his remarks.
Chairman Yuh-Jye of TWNIC, distinguished guests from home and abroad, and scholars and experts from the government, industry, and academia, greetings to you all. Today, I'm very honored to attend the ICANN APAC-TWNIC Engagement Forum co-organized by TWNIC and ICANN, which is an important platform for discussing Internet governance. We all know that Internet governance is an important foundation for promoting digital transformation and governance. It is not only an important issue for Taiwan, but also a global issue that requires multinational cooperation. We all know that the popularity of the Internet, cloud services, and AI big data analytics has created a new digital trend around the world. In this trend, it is clear that a new space for human civilization has been created, a space that covers not only the physical world but also the cyberspace. The first characteristic of this trend, well, we can see, is that it has created a new information revolution and a new civil society. Well, this means that the common people have broadened their engagement, and we can all work together to create, share, and even make decisions together, which is a trend of decentralization. Such a trend has had a great impact on the human civilization, and many new issues have thus emerged as well. The second characteristic is interdisciplinary digital innovation. This new digital wave has blurred the boundaries of traditional industries, formed a new competitive landscape, and renewed the industrial ecosystem, with digital services and software leading the development of a new form of digital economy, especially the platform economy and data economy. Under the development trend of the new digital economy, some innovative industry players, through technological innovation or business model innovation, are breaking the established rules of the game, and the winner does take it all, leading to the phenomena of monopoly or oligopoly of first movers. In addition to these two characteristics, the spread of COVID-19 and development of the Russia-Ukraine war in the past 2 years have made the world realize that in addition to accelerating the pace of digital transformation, it is also necessary to strengthen digital resilience in order to respond to various changes. In addition, how to promote zero carbon transformation and digital transformation in parallel, complementing each other, is also a topic worthy of our attention, especially in Taiwan. The digital manufacturing industry accounts for a high proportion of the national GDP, so it is very important to synchronize the zero carbon transformation with digital transformation. In addition, the UN and some relevant international organizations have recently put forward some important initiatives, mainly to promote the universal values of sustainability, equality, democracy, and inclusion in the digital world through global digital collaboration. Well, these features and important development trends are worthy of our attention, and we should propose relevant measures in response. In general, digital resilience is the foundation for national survival, and digital sustainability is a commitment to building an innovative, secure, and sustainable digital homeland. It is both a strategic issue at the national level as well as a global sustainable development issue. Taiwan will not and cannot be absent from these issues. So we have promoted various national level digital development policies and will establish a dedicated ministry to promote them. We all understand that internet governance is the foundation for digital resilience and sustainability. We're pleased that in addition to in-depth discussions on the global DNS domain name system, IP policy, and internet security, this forum will also address how to protect freedom of speech on the internet and how to protect digital human rights, which are very important to the functioning of a democracy. We need to build an online environment that strikes a balance between freedom and trustworthiness, and further implement digital governance that is fair, transparent, accountable, and inclusive. The promotion of this work is not only the responsibility of the government, but also requires the consensus of all stakeholders in the public and private sector to work together to promote it effectively. Well, therefore, this forum is very important to the overall development of Taiwan's internet environment. The organizers have invited international scholars and experts to engage in discussions so that Taiwan, which plays an important role in technology industry in the Asia-Pacific region, can take this opportunity to further understand the relevant issues and practices of global internet governance and further build Taiwan into a safer and more resilient internet environment in the future. I think this is definitely the most important goal of this event, and also hope that all of you can propose concrete and effective initiatives and recommendations. I believe that the government of Taiwan will definitely adopt and implement these recommendations. Finally, I wish you all a successful conference and good health and all the best to all of you. Thank you for your participation today.
Thank you very much, Minister Guo, for your remarks. As mentioned earlier in Minister Guo's remarks, the internet governance has played a very important role. The internet has led to information reform and the improvement of civic engagement, as well as digital transformation and the establishment of a new ecosystem. Internet governance lays a solid foundation for digital resilience and digital sustainability. In the future, we will continue to work on internet governance so that we can further achieve fairness, transparency, and accountability. Once again, we would like to thank Minister Guo for his remarks. Ladies and gentlemen, we will now invite Dr. Wei-Chung Teng, Commissioner at National Communication Commission, to say a few words. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Dr. Teng.
Dr. Cerf, Mr. Sullivan, Ms. Low, Paul, Tang Zhengwei, Guo Zhengwei, Yuh-Jye, distinguished speakers and guests today, and all who join us, good morning. On behalf of Chairperson Yau-Hwang of NCC, first I would like to congratulate TWNIC for successfully holding the third ICANN APAC-TWNIC engagement forum, along with the IP open policy meeting today, this year. I'm looking forward to learn new topics regarding the internet governance and also the current progress of these topics. For the past 16 years, NCC serves as the administration of telecommunication, and we have been working closely with TWNIC to keep the telecommunication infrastructure to including IP address, domain name system, and other critical components to function smoothly and continuously. In the near future, NCC will collaborate with the forthcoming Ministry of Digital Affairs and also, of course, TWNIC to make sure that we can keep contributing to the development of internet and digital society. We will have more than one partner in Taiwan, but the commitment to the development of the internet should remain. Finally, I wish the two-day event a great success and the discussion between experts a rewarding experiments to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Teng, for your remarks. Dr. Teng, please take your seat. Thank you very much. And once again, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us today. Ladies and gentlemen, next, we would like to invite Dr. Yuh-Jye Lee, Chairman of Taiwan Network Information Center, to say a few words. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Dr. Lee.
Vice President, Stakeholder Engagement, and the APAC Managing Director of ICANN, Jia-Rong and Guo Zhengwei, Tang Zhengwei, and Deng Yuan. Dr. Vinton, Cerf, and Edmon Zhong, and Akinori Mura from ICANN Board, Audrey Sullivan from ISOC, Paul Wilson from APAC-TWNIC, actor in the internet field, and ladies and gentlemen, good morning. On behalf of TWNIC, I would like to welcome you to the third ICANN APAC-TWNIC Engagement Forum with 37th TWNIC IP Open Policies Meeting. This is the third year we work with ICANN to host the engagement forum. Your attendance is more than welcome. ICANN is a global non-governmental nonprofit organization responsible for ensuring the stable and secure operation of Internet systems of unique identifiers, domain name, IP address, and the root server, taking the responsibilities for coordinating the unique identifiers and the securing stable interoperations of global internet network. In view of increasing internet usage and the domain name DNS abuse topics, this year's event will start from fundamental nature of internet and infrastructure to address the critical issues in domain name, IP address, and cybersecurity. Topics include DNS, RPKI, and new GTLD, and many others. Thanks to the multi-stakeholders from industry, government, academia, and various sectors actively participate in this event. Your participation and insights would allow us to further understand the latest issues of internet development around the world and thus build a safer internet environment. In parallel, this year, TWNIC IP Open Policy Meeting has entered its 37th edition, serving as the true communication platform for network technologies, research, and industry advancement. The meeting brings together the opinion of various service providers in Taiwan in regards to IP policies and management mechanism. TWNIC serves as a critical infrastructure network operator in Taiwan. We continuously provide domain name registration service of .tw.Taiwan, the IP address allocation service, and the cybersecurity intelligence sharing, promoting and assisting Taiwan's digital transformations is our commitment to the communities. Let's work together to empower the better and safer internet developers for Taiwan. Thank you for your participation again. Wish you will have a good health and stay safe. And I would like to say this is a very great event, and I hope we will learn a lot from you, and we will have a very nice and successful meeting in these 2 days. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lee. Dr. Lee, please take your seat. And we look forward to fruitful collaboration in the years to come, and also a rewarding conference in this 2-day session. Ladies and gentlemen, we will now proceed to the first opening speech today. Our first speaker is Mr. Edmon Chan. Mr. Chan currently serves as the CEO of DotAsia organization. He also serves on the board of ICANN the Executive Committee of Internet Society Hong Kong, and the board of Make a Difference Institute. He heads the Secretariat for the Asia-Pacific Regional Internet Governance Forum. Mr. Chan is a social innovator and entrepreneur. He is also the inventor of patents underlying technologies for IDN and email addresses on the Internet. Without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Edmon Chan. Mr. Chan, the floor is yours.
Thank you everyone, and thank you for having me here. Always excited to talk about ICANN, but let me start with a little bit of Chinese, even though I am not really good at it. But
for me, it is a great pleasure for me to see all of you at this meeting. Well, just like last year, we have to meet online through a screen this time. It was actually very difficult for me to think. The last time I visited Taiwan was back in 2019. So in 2019 until now, the entire world had gone through an earth-shattering change. But hopefully, come next year, we will be able to meet face-to-face in Taipei.
So I really wish to be there with you and truly hope that next year we can come out of the pandemic and be there with you in Taiwan in person. And speaking about the pandemic, it has brought the world at least for travel to a screeching halt. And the last 2.5 years are certainly difficult times. Some people say that the world goes on. In fact, ICANN, the internet governance ecosystem, the internet continues to function. And some even say that younger participants are conversant with these digital tools. We're on these webinars and people are comfortable with it. But I personally believe that the reason why this consensus building and running code, rough consensus model continues to work is that it is building on the social capital and trust that over the many years prior to the pandemic that is built up within the community. And I personally believe that the truly ultra high bandwidth meeting that face-to-face meeting provides is still very important and irreplaceable. The nuances and subtleties that allow for appropriate compromises in discussions, especially sensitive policy discussions, the ability to hash things out candidly and serendipitously over coffee or a beer on the side, I believe, and I truly believe it makes a difference. And looking ahead, the future of ICANN and the future of internet governance requires even more of that creative, collective creativity, that spirit of the internet, I think, which gave birth to what we now call the internet multi-stakeholder governance model. And I want to emphasize that this is not the multi-stakeholder approach that you may have learned from your business school, where a company engages and co-opts some of its surrounding environment and stakeholders to engage in a bit of divide and conquer and a bit of pitting one against the other. This is not the business school model of multi-stakeholder model that we're talking about here with internet governance. It is the internet multi-stakeholder model that upholds a bottom-up approach in agenda setting and a decision-making process that really allows different stakeholders to participate in a deliberative approach. That's what is important, and that is what upholds the human rights and the belief. I think many different areas we talk about sovereignty, and I think this multi-stakeholder model believes in the sovereignty of the people, of the users, that holds up the sovereignty of the internet, just like the sovereignty of the people that holds up the sovereignty of the nation. I think this is a very important aspect of what we call multi-stakeholder model in internet governance. But today, I think, at least in my view, or maybe I'm worrying too much, I see today this multi-stakeholder model that we treasure, and I heard Minister Audrey mention earlier, the multi-stakeholder model that we believe in is nevertheless facing challenges externally and tensions internally. And I see that no longer are most stakeholders that are participating fully, full-heartedly supporting the multi-stakeholder model. And there are reasons, and there are good reasons for it. And that those are the challenges like cybercrime, abuses, cyber warfare, the weaponization of information. I think fear causes people and governments to recoil and become protective. The global multi-stakeholder model, I believe, relies on an open and interoperable internet. And the kind of recoiling and protectionism is problematic. It's understandable, but it is still going to be problematic. And that's one of the challenges that faces this multi-stakeholder model in my mind. Some governments and stakeholders speak about global multi-stakeholder model, yet in fact, it's actually leaning towards protectionism. And that is a challenge. I think this, going forward, we will need the collective creativity from the community even further. But even then, I personally believe that paying lip service is still better than not. And also that it is this multi-stakeholder model that we must treasure, and its inbuilt capability to evolve itself is something that we need to work on and work further. ICANN today, the IETF today, other parts of the internet ecosystem is actually very different today than it was 10, 15, 20 years ago. The ability for the systems, the people systems, and the structures, the development of policies to adapt to new challenges, to change, and to evolve is the reason why I think this model is strong. And we must remember, we are, and every one of us, our participation is actually what makes the difference. Then again, as we observe, especially the pandemic sending waves of disruption across the world in the last 2.5 years, I really cannot help but wonder, really just what if the WHO was governed in a multi-stakeholder model? What if, how could the participation of the people, of the professionals, of the medical professionals, of civil society around the world might have made a difference to the pandemic versus the WHO we know today? And then as the war rages on in Ukraine, I cannot help but wonder, what if the UN was built on a multi-stakeholder model? Is it not the people who really treasures most peace? So some people lament about the internet and the internet governance becoming increasingly politicized. I understand that, but I think it's actually simply because the internet is important enough and that it becomes politicized. And more importantly, I think we must not shy away from it. The sustainability of the internet governance ecosystem is at stake. And I think political neutrality is just a disguise for the direction of the status quo and going forward. And when you look at that direction and you see that it's headed towards dismantling of the multi-stakeholder model, then I believe we can no longer afford to remain apolitical or politically neutral. Yes, there was once upon a time in internet governance that we could afford to rely on the status quo, but I feel, and I'm afraid, that isn't the case no more. And getting politically activated does not mean enthralling in political struggles or machination or those kind of things. What I mean by being politically active is actually about participation. It's about participating actively to make a difference in the little things that exemplifies the global multi-stakeholder model. And I think for the ICANN community, it's about challenging issues, tackling challenging issues well within its purview while collaborating with others. And that's also, you know, I guess the attitude and the ideas that myself and us here at DotAsia brings. And here's a good example. For those of you who know me, know that my favorite topic is of course internationalized domain names, IDNs, and universal acceptance, and so on. The challenge in an IDN and you know is really interesting, and it's an area I think that exemplifies collaboration at ICANN. Early on, the Chinese community from Taiwan, Hong Kong, Macau, and China worked together closely from early years and still do, in finding common ground, in developing consensus, in working beyond the, you know, with other communities, the Japanese community, the Korean community, and around Asia. And as the IDN work progressed, different language communities started working together, and challenges like in IDN variants, unlike the English domain names where capital letters and small letters are mapped together technically, IDN variants are like traditional Chinese and simplified Chinese that are not and require mapping by policy. Other languages require that too, and realize that, you know, the linguists, the technology people, the policy people, registry operators and registrars, as well as users come together in a multi-stakeholder model, bottom-up way to tackle these issues. And universal acceptance becomes an issue as well. IDNs have been around for more than 20 years now, but the challenge then becomes different databases and applications around the internet needs to be updated, upgraded. And universal acceptance presents a challenge on its own, but it is also an opportunity, I believe, and it's an opportunity for ICANN to engage and rally the global community to participate in the process. And recently, another related issue, I think, is that ICANN confronts is these alternative routes, especially this new wave where it includes blockchain and alternative domains. I'm really uncertain if some of these alternative domain systems make claim to talk about distributed, non-hierarchical approach. But when you really think about it, I really am uncertain whether they do offer the IDN capabilities that we need. Don't care as much for the policies of IDN variants, and you know they're hardly considered. So once you have to consider interoperability, you know, governance of a system is unavoidable, I believe. And that's where ICANN and the internet governance system is important. Another ICANN challenge is on DNS abuse. And here, just, you know, at DotAsia, we focus on collaboration and we focus on doing a little, you know, a small step. And earlier in the year, we announced a work with TWNIC, which we're quite excited about. DNS abuse is another challenge at ICANN that requires coordination, but also requires collaboration beyond the immediate ICANN community. With the collaboration with TWNIC, how we are dealing with it is in collaboration at a registry operator level to address different types of abuses, but you know, to also put it into operation and put it into practice. We believe that the work between DotAsia and TWNIC is a starting point, and we hope that this will actually be the start of a movement for other bilateral collaborations and multilateral collaborations in this sense across the internet. And this is where bilateral and multilateral work. But at the global policy level, multi-stakeholder model is the important one. And I think another challenge and another collaboration that DotAsia is working on. And I'm going to introduce a few other things that DotAsia has been working on that I think exemplifies some of the collaborative work that we do. For the last decade, we have been working with the children's rights and children's welfare community to have DotKids established. And we're quite excited that DotKids is officially delegated into the ICANN root zone earlier in April 4th, which is the Children's Day here in Hong Kong and there in Taiwan as well. As we celebrate Children's Day, DotKids is about working with the experts at child safety online, but also developing policies to oversee the registry. And we are looking to, it's been in the works for over a decade, as I mentioned, and we are aiming to launch within the year. And this is what we are looking at is also working with experts from the IGF Dynamic Coalition on Child Safety Online to look at the balance, because yes, as much as we need protection for children, it's also important to uphold the freedom of information, the freedom to seek, to receive, and to impart information for kids. And so we look at kids as our future, but we also need to remember that kids are our present today, and their participation is important as well. And one of the exciting things that DotKids initiative has already done is that in the last little while, back in 2013 and 2013, the DotKids initiative had actually helped put together one of the first children's IGF and also one of the first children's forum at ICANN. And these are some of the things that DotKids hope to do into the future as well. Another aspect that we are working on at DotAsia, another little step that we're working with APAC-TWNIC Foundation on since 2020, when the pandemic arrived and there was a surge in internet usage. The interest and the attention on the carbon footprint of the internet was heightened, and the Eco-Internet Index is something that we have been working on at DotAsia for the last year. And a pilot study report is actually published. You can go to ecointernet.asia to take a look. And it looks at the different axes. It looks at the digital economy. It looks at the energy that is powering the internet. And it looks at the efficiency of the internet to come together with a ranking system that ranks the different jurisdictions and countries around the world, especially in Asia first. The first year as a pilot, we only worked on 6 jurisdictions, but in the coming year, we're hoping to expand to across Asia, and hopefully in the future with collaboration also from others to work with others around the world as well. Part of the narrative also, I'll play a little video here, and hopefully you can see it properly on your side. Part of the narrative is understanding as the internet grows, of course, the carbon footprint grows, but what it replaces, what it actually helps in the sustainability may be even more important.
Global carbon emission has dropped by 5.8% in 2020 due to COVID lockdown and economic slowdown. But it is expected to bounce back in part due to skyrocketing internet usage. So how does the internet emit carbon? What is the carbon footprint of the internet? Any kind of online activity such as watching videos, playing games, sending emails involves the transfer of data. The internet takes approximately 0.015 kilowatt hour of power to transfer 1 gigabyte of data. And that does not include the electricity powering the device you are using. However, this carbon footprint is still way less than driving to the cinema to watch a movie or sending a letter for the post office to deliver it. Nevertheless, with booming internet usage, we still need to be more carbon conscious about internet usage. One way to improve the eco-friendliness of the internet is to choose to have more renewable energy for the power grid that is powering the internet. To learn more, go to ecointernet.asia. Do more, waste less.
Yes, and do more, waste less is definitely the idea of that particular initiative. And thinking about the future, DotAsia, also works very, very, very hard and very proud of the Net Mission Ambassador program that we put together for many years. In fact, this is one of the first youth-focused internet governance engagement and training activity. And many of DotAsia's work is built on the Net Mission program. So when we talk about the future and sustainability, we believe we start with youth. And this is also a kind of collaboration and the small steps that we hope to take that would spark a larger movement. In fact, we are quite excited that the Net Mission Ambassador program actually created the first youth IGF, and that sparked really a global movement. Today, youth internet governance forums, youth IGFs is really spread across the world in many different jurisdictions and regions. And the Net Mission alumni, the Net Mission ambassadors and alumni and the team continues to be involved in that movement today. And of course, last but not least, actually, that I want to introduce to you a little bit is the APRIGF, the Asia Pacific Regional Internet Governance Forum. And we have been honored and proud to serve as the secretariat for the APRIGF for, since its beginning. And this year, we're excited that it is returning with a strong component of face-to-face meeting still as hybrid, but we will be in Singapore in September. So, I think this is one of the initiatives that we try to bring collaboration and together. And this is one of the things that I believe the internet governance ecosystem and the multi-stakeholder model is really about. So, this year also for the APRIGF, actually, we are working in collaboration with APNIC and APSIG, the APSIG, the School of Internet Governance. And one of the things that is that I want to close with is that whenever there is collaboration, there will need to be some compromise, but definitely in a constructive way. And that is what DotAsia believes in, and in fact is really embedded into our vision statement, which holds the belief that a collaborative Asia-Pacific community is conducive to peace and prosperity for the people in the region and beyond. But collaboration and compromise also produces a level of debate, and difficult issues require in-depth discussions. And as we look at the internal tensions at ICANN that I mentioned, and the internet governance ecosystem, I though believe, and I believe many of my colleagues at ICANN will also believe that a noisy ICANN is a healthy ICANN. And that I believe is important, is a very important objective of this ICANN APAC-TWNIC engagement forum, to really engage and attract participation from the Taiwanese community and beyond. And I wish you as I wish you a fruitful and successful conference. Really, thank you very much for allowing me this time to rant a little about my passion and belief in the multi-stakeholder internet governance model at ICANN, our works at DotAsia for a free, open, interoperable, and sustainable internet. Hopefully, but that it could inspire your participation to come join the movement to make a noisier and healthier ICANN. So I hope to see you in The Hague. ICANN is also going back to a strong face-to-face component next month at The Hague, and hopefully I'll see you there at The Hague. Also in September in Singapore for the APRIGF, and definitely looking very much forward to the next year to being there in Taipei with you. Once again, I really hope that I could inspire you to come participate And really, I do think a noisier ICANN is definitely a healthier ICANN. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chung, for sharing your insights with us. And thank you for sharing with us all these very impressive initiatives. We look forward to a healthier and noisier ICANN. Ladies and gentlemen, our next opening speaker is Dr. Wolfgang Kleinwächter. Dr. Kleinwächter is the Professor Emeritus at the International Communication Policy and Regulation Department for Media and Information Studies at the University of Aarhus in Denmark. Dr. Kleinwächter is also the Commissioner in the Global Commission on Stability in Cyberspace and former ICANN board member. He has been involved in Internet governance issues since the early 1990s. Today, Dr. Kleinwächter is going to share with us Internet governance, the past and the future between policy and technology code war in cyberspace. Without further ado, please join me in welcoming Dr. Kleinwächter. Dr. Kleinwächter, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and my best greetings goes to Taipei. And I can only, as a former ICANN board member, support what Edmon just said, that a noisy ICANN is a very good ICANN and a better ICANN. So please join the community. We need more discussion, not less discussion. And in the difficult times we have now, it's always good to go back to the past and to see what has happened in the last half century if you want to manage the future. So I think there is a relationship between the past and the future, and just recently in Washington, more than 60 countries, including Taiwan, signed the Declaration on the Future of the Internet, and I will come back to this new document at a later stage. So I have a number of slides. So I always start with the history, and I have subdivided. So, and the interesting thing, next slide, please. The interesting thing is that the Internet started in the 1950s and 60s as a military research project under the Department of Defense in the United States. It was the DARPANET, which paved the way for what later became the Internet. And when the tensions between Soviet Union and the United States of America were reduced a little bit by negotiations in the end of the 50s. The whole research project moved into the hands of the academic community, and it was the academic community which did build the Internet with all the technical protocols like TCP/IP or the domain name system or the ad in our email. All this was developed in the 70s and 80s. So at this time, nobody had any clue that the Internet will become a factor for business. But with the invention of the World Wide Web, you know, the Internet development moved into the commercial sector. And this was the .com boom in the 1990s when the Internet more or less exploded. And if this is a big business, then it's very understandable that policy will march in. And so the early 2000 years did see a policy debate about the Internet development. So ICANN was established in 1998 as an organization to develop specific technical Internet policies for domain names, IP addresses, and Internet protocols. And then we had the World Summit on the Information Society organized by the United Nations, which produced the Internet Governance Forum, place where all stakeholders could exchange views and experiences about Internet development. And with the invention of the smartphones and the emergence of social networks, the Internet became an issue for the whole society. And now in the 2020s, what we see in the cyberspace is an arms race, a militarization, that the internet is pulled into geostrategic conflicts, as we see just in the war between Russia and the Ukraine, where cyber attacks are an integrated component in the military debate. So you could say, welcome back to the past. But these are my 6 waves. And against this background, next slide, please. So we have to reconsider, you know, what the internet is, what it should be in our daily life. So 25 years ago, when I was already involved in a lot of discussions, the internet was seen as a big enabler for global democracy. A lot of people will remember the declaration of John Perry Barlow on cyber independence. And he said, you know, the internet creates a new world. We move from hierarchies to networks. So no central power anymore. Everything is decentralized. So we will have no top-down decisions. Everything is bottom-up and will be inclusive, equal, transparency, freedom of expression, and human rights. So this was the big hope. And certainly, you know, this was not wrong, but it was probably a little bit one-sided. And today, what we see is that the internet is a risk factor for world peace. So we see an exploding cybercrime, fake news and hate speech, and the militarization of the cyberspace. So what has happened? That we move from the promise of digital democracy to the risks of a cyber war. What has changed? So I have 3 elements here which give an explanation what has really changed. The first thing is that internet governance isn't anymore a technical problem with some political implications. It's now a political problem with a technical component. So, and that means all the problems we have in the political sphere are now also in the cyber sphere. So this is unavoidable. The second thing is the internet, as any other instrument, can be used for the good and misused for the bad. So a knife is a good thing. You need it for your steak, but you can kill a person. And so probably this was underestimated by the founding fathers because they expected that only the good guys will use the internet. And now we have realized that also the bad guys are using the internet because the internet is an instrument and nothing else. And the third point, what has changed in the last 25 years is that the US isn't anymore the only big player in cyberspace. So the internet came out from the United States, and it even today, the big US internet corporation dominate cyberspace, but there are other players in cyberspace which have a different idea how cyberspace should be organized. It's first of all China, it's Russia, but it's also Brazil and India, it's the European Union. And so what we have is a multipolar power play in cyberspace, and not only, you know, that one player can determine the rules. So this is a new complexity which is challenging for all stakeholders. So next slide, please. So the question is this really now a new Cold War in cyberspace? Are we back in the 1950s when Soviet Union and the United States had this Cold War after World War II? So in the next 2 slides, and in the next slides, I have 1 slide for the similarities and 1 slide for the differences. Because you have, on the one hand, indeed similarities between the 50s and the 2020s, but you have also differences. So let's start with the similarities. So what you have now, again, are 2 antagonistic systems. In the 50s, it was communism versus capitalism, US versus Soviet Union. What we have now is a democratic internet and an autocratic internet. So these are 2 different systems. So when there was this meeting in Alaska between China and the Chinese leadership and the US leadership, Foreign Minister Blinken and National Security Advisor Sullivan. So the Chinese Politburo member Wang said, you know, we have 2 types of progress. the United States-style democracy and Chinese-style democracy. So, but we call it's the Chinese-style democracy is more or less an autocratic system. It's more top-down. The American system is more bottom-up. So that means all the differences I mentioned in the previous slides are coming here. That means we have, like in the Cold War in the 1950s, two different systems. So the second similarity is that we have controversial strategies. So in the 50s, we had the strategy of the Soviet Union, a communist world revolution, and the US was rolling back strategy. Today, we have China with its digital Silk Road, which tries to export the Chinese model of the internet governance, and the Western countries react with their concept, which is color revolutions or whatsoever support of stakeholders in other countries. So we have also a similarity if it comes to the military. So we have we had a nuclear arms race in the 1950s. And now we have an arms race in cyberspace with autonomous weapon systems. And you see also in the Ukraine war, the drones play a rather decisive role. And we had a high level of mistrust. In the 1950s, we had spies on both sides. You know, Gary Powers spied from the US side to the Soviet Union. Rosenberg spied for the Soviets in the US. And in the 2020s, we have now cookies and attacks. So the Americans used Stuxnet against Iran, and the Russians used SolarWinds against the US. So both sides have a high level of mistrust. So these are the similarities. What about the differences? And next slide, please. The big difference is from the 50s to the 20s that we do not have anymore an Iron Curtain. So the Iron Curtain really separated the two worlds. But in the 2020s, we have open borders. So the world is not really separated. We have, you know, a lot of connections across the big differences. We have a global economy. So in the 1950s, we had separate economies and embargoes, so like the COCOM rules from NATO. Today, we have a world economy and global supply chains, even as this is now under fire and there are a number of disruptions, but still we have a tremendous interconnected world economy. The report of the UN high level concluded, co-chaired by Jack Ma from China and Melinda Gates from the US, that we live in an age of cyber interdependence. And this is another difference. So in the 1950s, there was a way for independence. But in the 2020s, we have now an interdependence. And there are issues, you know, which are, let's say, politically neutral, like climate change or the pandemic, which is calling for a global cooperation across ideological barriers. So these are similarities and differences. What can we conclude from these two slides? And let's go to the next slide. So based on this, we can have a worst case scenario, and then we have a best case scenario. So academics always work with scenarios. So what could be the worst case? The worst case is really a total confrontation, and we are on the brink of this now with the war in the Ukraine. So I have here a number of elements which would be part of a worst case scenario. The first thing is that we see really a full militarization of cyberspace and a digital arms race with drones, killer bees, killer robots, cyber attacks below the red line of Article 2 of the UN Charter, which defines exactly what the use of force is, which would trigger Article 51, the right to self-defense, and with an escalation risk that a cyber war will move into a shooting war. And we have now really a number of proxy wars. I think in a certain degree, Russia versus Ukraine is a proxy war. And so both China and the US is watching exactly what is going on there. And lots of tests are there. Also, if it comes to cyber attacks and DDoS attacks and private IT army, which is recruited now by Ukraine to defend itself. And a lot of things are happening there. Probably not in the spotlight, but in the shadow. But insofar, there are some lessons. And we have the proxy wars, Iran versus Israel, Armenia versus Azerbaijan, where drones also played an important role. So part of the worst case scenario is really a militarization of cyberspace. Another element could be the decoupling of the global economy. Sanctions, building of digital fortresses, attacks against supply chains. All this would be disastrous and would be not good for the global economy. What we could see in a worst case scenario is a massive violation of human rights. So it starts with AI-enabled censorship and could go to mass surveillance via AI-enabled face recognition. All the scenarios from a social score system, which is discussed and partly introduced in China, could go far beyond our traditional understanding that human rights comes first. And what we could see on the political level is building of new blocs. So we had the Warsaw Pact and NATO in the 1950s and 1960s. So what we see now is we forming a transatlantic partnership where democratic countries come together. On the other hand, we see what somebody would call a trans-Asian partnership. In the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, we see the agreement between Putin and Xi, President Xi in Beijing in February this year, where they had also a long paragraph in the final declaration on internet governance. They want to use the ITU to organize also the domain name system. And then, like in the 1950s, when some countries are not ready to get pulled into a big power conflict, they think about, a non-aligned movement, as did Mr. Nehru from India and Sukarno from Indonesia and Mr. Tito from Yugoslavia in the 1950s when they created the non-aligned movement. And we have now a discussion already about a digital non-aligned movement. This would lead to a fragmentation of the internet, to standardization wars. So we have the debate about the new internet protocol, which was triggered by Huawei a couple of years ago in the ITU. We could have new debates about not only 5G, but 6G. And this could also, again, lead to the bifurcation of the internet. So this is the worst case scenario. What about the best case scenario? Next slide, please. So the best case scenario is certainly cooperation. So in an age of cyber interdependence, as it was stated by the high-level group in the United Nations, so the only way forward is cooperation, regardless of all the ideological, political, cultural differences you have. So the Secretary General of the United Nations has proposed a roadmap on digital cooperation. They said, okay, this is the way forward, regardless of all the differences we have to cooperate, based on the Charter principles of the Charter of the United Nations and the Human Rights Declaration from 1948. So an important element of this roadmap is to have advanced, enhanced architecture of the internet governance system with an IGF plus, a leadership panel for the IGF, and the nomination of a new tech envoy for the UN, for the United Nations, a greater involvement of parliamentarians in the Internet Governance Forum. And the plan is now that until next year, the United Nations will work on a global digital compact. This will become part of the so-called UN Summit on the Future, which will take place in September next year. And just last week, the United Nations published a call for ideas and proposals to have a multi-stakeholder debate to prepare this global digital compact, which could be an important document for the next decade. And in 2025, we have the review conference on the World Summit on the Information Society, the so-called WSIS Plus 20. So digital cooperation would be an important element in a best case scenario. A second important element would be that governments agree on cybersecurity. The Secretary General of the United Nations, Guterres, is asking for years for a prohibition of killer robots and autonomous weapon systems. So when Biden did meet Putin in Geneva last year, he gave him a list of 16 key elements which should not be attacked by cyber attacks: hospitals, energy, water, transportation, elections, finances, the internet, the public core of the internet. So that means governments could agree, do not attack critical infrastructure with cyber attacks. So you could have some measures for confidence building in cyberspace. And there are organizations in the United Nations and elsewhere, also in the Asian region, in the ASEAN context, where confidence and capacity building measures are discussed, and people could agree on something like a red telephone for the cyberspace. That means if something is happening, you have a telephone number and you can call somebody, and then to figure out, whether this is malicious or an unfriendly attack, or that the government has nothing to do with this. So I think these are measures which could help to recreate trust in cyberspace, because the whole internet was based on trust. And this trust is lost, unfortunately, or has been lost in the recent years. And we have also negotiations on a cybercrime convention to fight criminals, because the exploding cybercrime, ransomware attacks are really are polluting cyberspace, and something has to be done. We had a convention in the Council of Europe, the so-called Budapest Convention, which is certainly a core treaty, but it's not a UN treaty, and that's why now negotiations have started in the framework of the United Nations to get a legally binding document to fight cybercrime. It would be also good to have a rule book for the digital economy. So the European Commission is now working on a series of legal texts. We have the Digital Service Act, the Digital Market Act, we have the Data Governance Act, we have a new Security Act. So that means the European Union wants to become the norm maker, not the norm taker. And there are a number of global negotiations also in place in the field of digital economy in the World Trade Organizations. So Japan is pushing for a couple of years for e-commerce treaty, a free flow of data with trust. Just this morning or yesterday, the G7 ministers for the digital economy had a meeting in Germany, and they agreed to support these negotiations in the World Trade Organizations for a digital trade agreement. So we have the agreement of the G20 states on digital taxation. So the OECD plays here a role, and then we have all the new efforts to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals by bridging the digital divide. The so-called UN Decade of Action would help that the digital tools could be further enhanced to bridge the digital divide and bring less developed countries and the next billion internet users to cyberspace. Part of the best case scenario would be also guidelines for AI, for artificial intelligence. We have already some documents. Meanwhile, guiding principles adopted by the OECD 2-3 years ago. Last year, the UNESCO adopted a document on the ethics of artificial intelligence. And we have now 2 negotiations on binding norms in the European Union and in the Council of Europe. And let's wait and see what will come out from this. And then certainly the management of critical internet resources, that this remains neutral, that the technical internet governance keeps out of political conflicts. This will be an important element in a best case scenario. So, and this is the role of ICANN, the role of the Internet Engineering Task Force, etc. So next slide. What we can do now, with this 2 scenarios. So there is certainly, we have a basic contradiction in the internet world. So on the one hand, ICANN and other organizations are arguing we have one world and one internet and fighting against the fragmentation on the internet. On the other hand, and this is true in particular for the technical infrastructure, the domain name system, is universal. So on the other hand, the reality is we have one world and 193 national jurisdictions. So this is a natural conflict. So that means we have a number of options. One is, can we move the one world, one internet philosophy from the, let's say, ground layer, the technical layer, to the political layer? Probably this is an illusion. The risk is higher that the one world, 193 national jurisdictions will go down to the transport layer, and we will see the fragmentation of the internet. So I think this is a battle, and so far we have not yet found a protocol which would link the one world, one internet philosophy to the one world, 193 national jurisdictions philosophy. So we have a number of concepts like what Russia is pushing for, the national internet segment, or cyber sovereignty pushed by China. So all this goes to one world, 193 national jurisdictions, to push this into the one world, one internet philosophy of the technical community. So this is a contradiction, and there is not yet a clear vision, how to settle this. The other is it's not really a conflict, but some people have it labeled as a conflict between the multi-stakeholder approach and the multilateralism of the intergovernmental system in the United Nations. So multi-stakeholderism means that you cannot find solutions for the internet in a government's-only environment. You need all stakeholders. So that 80% of the internet infrastructure is in the hands of the private sector. So we have 4 or 5 billion internet users. So that means civil society plays a role. And the whole thing is managed and developed by the technical community. That means you cannot find a solution by excluding the technical community. On the other hand, a lot of governments think they can do it alone. And they say multi-stakeholderism is bad, and we should have everything in the hands of the governments. Government should regulate it, or intergovernmental organizations. We need a new intergovernmental organization for the internet. So, and while the Western countries always support the multi-stakeholder principle by lip service, if it comes to the reality, then very often we have see also that the governments prefer to talk amongst themselves. So the Washington Declaration on the Future of the Internet, which was established, which was adopted just last week, so was negotiated by governments only. So they had no public call for involvement of private sector, of the technical community or civil society. So, and they have a very good paragraph which supports the multi-stakeholder approach for internet governance, but they did not practicize what they breached. And the same thing happened also with this morning, yesterday, when the G7 ministers for the digital policy came together. So there was, they supported the multi-stakeholder approach, but they did not involve the stakeholders in the discussion of their documents, which were adopted by them today. So that means you have a number of contradictions in this field. There's also, you know, the conflict between cybersecurity on the one hand and human rights on the other hand. So Western countries all agree that human rights should go first. Also in the Washington Declaration, freedom and human rights is a first priority. But if it comes to cybersecurity, then it's difficult to find the right balance. So how far you dig into fundamental rights to you know, make the internet safe and secure for individual users. So this is also a contradiction. This is a conflict which is not easy to settle. So coming now to the last slide, what is the conclusion? So how we can move forward to the Global Digital Compact and to Business Plus 20 in the year 2025. So that means the next 2-3 years. So my personally expectation is that the probability of a global hot cyber war is low, but the cyber peace will be very cold. So that means we will have a very difficult time ahead of us. And the most probable scenario, in my view, is a mix of confrontation and cooperation. So some elements from the slide from the worst case scenario will become reality. And I hope that some elements from the best case scenario will become also a reality. So that means this is what I call the mix of confrontation and cooperation. So I remember more than 10 years ago when Bill Clinton addressed the ICANN meeting in San Francisco. And so this was because Clinton was invited because under Clinton's presidency, ICANN was established, and the president of ICANN at this time, Rod Beckstrom, said it would be a good idea to ask a man who, under his presidency, ICANN was established, what he thinks today. Means in 2011 about internet governance. And it was very interesting when Clinton said, okay, when I became president, we had no real clue what the internet will be, but for us it was clear this will be a big thing, and we have to test it out and to discover new territory. And this concept was, so we have to stumble forward. As long as it's forward, it's okay. So stumbling forward is probably right concept. So that means there will be no final solution. There will be no that you clarify an issue forever. So it's testing, you know, it's trial and error, it's stumbling forward. And, you know, with this concept, probably we can do some good things in the years ahead until 2025, and then let's wait and see. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kleinwächter, for sharing your insights with us. And thank you for walking us through the history of the internet. And thank you for sharing with us the future prospects of the internet. Once again, thank you very much to Dr. Kleinwächter for joining us today. Ladies and gentlemen, we will now take a short break. The next session will begin at 10:45 Taiwan time. Please be back by 10:45. Thank you very much. See you in a bit. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the third ICANN APAC-TWNIC Engagement Forum. We will now proceed to the high-level opening panel discussion. In this session, we're going to discuss how to fulfill global public interest by means of the fundamental nature of the Internet. The moderator for the session is Ms. Nicole Chan. Ms. Chan is the former chairperson of Taiwan's National Communications Commission and a member of ICANN Address Supporting Organization Address Council. She is also the honorary chairman of Taiwan Association for Blockchain Ecosystem Innovation. Ms. Chan's areas of expertise include intellectual property law, telecommunication regulations and policy, Internet jurisdiction and policy, Internet governance, cybersecurity governance, ICT, and the creative industry. Before I hand the floor to the moderator, who will introduce our panelists today. A friendly reminder to all the panelists, since all the panelists and the moderator are online in the session, later on, when you are introduced, it will be very helpful if you can quickly say hi to the audience so that we can help check if your sound is coming through on site on our end. Thank you very much for your cooperation. I will now hand the floor to the moderator, Ms. Nicole Chan. Ms. Chan, the floor is yours. Ms. Chan,
It's okay.
Yes, now it's coming through.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the first section. No matter you are joining us on site or remotely, have a good day. On behalf of Yau-Hwang, CEO and Board Director of TWNIC, I will be the moderator of the section. It has been the nature and the fundamental concept that the Internet is a universal endpoint identification through protocol addressing since 1980s. ICANN filed a contract to incorporate the PTI, taking responsible for the operation on coordinating the Internet unique identifiers and maintaining the trust of the community to provide these services in an unbiased basis. At ICANN, the GPI is tied to its mission and is a fundamental spirit of primary governance on the DNS. When the global increasing of Internet usage and the coming up issues, whether we have been experienced, that would be probably leading us away from the fundamental concept of the Internet or not. This section, we would like to ask what is the nature of Internet and how to fulfill global public interests by means of the fundamental nature of the Internet. Let's go back to the origin of the Internet while we are moving forward to the next era of Internet. So currently, this section, we have 4 distinguished panelists from user at large, TLD, ICANN, APAC-TWNIC, and Internet governance, so that we can have a great opportunity to look closer to the topic from the aspects of end user, tech, policy, management authority, and governance with high-level viewpoint to take a look at the issues we have been facing with the continued growing and increasing Internet use and applications with the global ecosystem. So I am going to introduce our 4 distinguished panelists. The first, I would like to introduce the Marine. Marine, please wave your hands to our audience. Yeah. Currently, Marine is the chair of the at-large advisory committee, ICANN. She's also the co-chair of the dynamic and the coalition of small island developing states in the Internet ecosystem. Marine is also the former chair of the board directors of DotAsia. Yeah, when I served as the board members of the DotAsia. Yeah, she's my chair. Yeah. And Marine also is the former chair of the board of the Pacific Islands chapter of the Internet Society. and also the former member of the Public Interest Registry Advisory Council. And our second panelist is the Jeff Houston. Yeah, wave your hands to our audience.
Hi, good morning all.
Yeah, Jeff is the chief scientist at the Asia at APAC-TWNIC. Yeah, which APAC-TWNIC, we are all familiar with APAC-TWNIC. And he was the chief internet scientist of Telstra, and also the technical manager, Australia Academic and Research Network. And our third and fourth panelists, they are speakers of our opening speeches. Edmon, yeah, yeah, Edmon John. Right now, Edmon is the CEO of DotAsia and also the board member of ICANN. And Edmon also the social innovator and entrepreneur. He is the head of head of Secretariat of APR-IGF, and also the was the member of ICANN Enlarged Advisory Committee. Yeah, and our fourth panelist is the Professor Wolfgang. Yeah, yeah.
Hello.
Yeah, Professor Wolfgang was the used to the International Communication Policy and Regulation Department of Media and Information Studies, the University of Aarhus in Denmark. And the important thing is that he was the former ICANN board member from 2013 to 2015. And he's also the member of UN WSIS Working Group on Internet Governance. So we have four distinguished panelists today. Okay, now I'm going to hand over the time to Maureen. She's going to give us a 10-minute speech about the topic today. Maureen.
Thank you, Nicole Trust. My day job is as a development consultant, working mainly in policy development for environmental projects, my home island. Although I do have an IT organisation, which is an at-large structure called the Cook Islands Internet Action Group, which started off as a gathering of IT graduates from the University of South Pacific. We act as a sort of watchdog on internet-related activities on the main island of Rarotonga, in the Cook Islands where I live. But prior to that, I'd worked in the area of distance learning, initially with the Correspondence School in New Zealand. And when I joined the Correspondence School in 1989, more than 30 years ago, it was just starting to connect itself to the internet. So that as a regional staff member, I helped connect students with their teachers in Wellington using the internet. And before that, sometimes their schoolwork would take weeks to reach their teachers. But by the time I left in 2004, many of these students and their families were becoming very well acquainted with internet technology. And the feedback that I had given the school from the regions helped them to continually improve the services to meet the needs of students in remote areas who now relied on the internet, not only for their education, but their family also used it for their own personal and business ICT needs. But the Cook Islands, of course, is a New Zealand territory, so the education of secondary students on isolated outer islands was actually provided by the New Zealand Correspondence School where I had been. So in 2004, when I moved to Rarotonga to work with the Cook Islands Ministry of Education, I was the liaison with the school in Wellington. And one of the first roles that I had with the ministry was to assist the local telecom service to connect the schools on these remote islands to the internet, so that secondary school students could actually connect directly with their teachers in Wellington from the Pacific Ocean, other than using the phone, which had its own difficulties. But At that time, internet, and we're talking sort of like 2004, at that time, internet connection was slow. But the ability to actually communicate with their teachers, even in a short email, reduced their previous interaction time by months, because they had to do their work in hard copy, and the irregular shipping to these islands meant that their work would take months to get to their teachers in Wellington. So the internet for them became a lifeline, not only to connect these students to their enhanced learning opportunities, but also for the other advantages that their communities could gain from being introduced to the world outside of their tiny, isolated island existences. And, you know, it was really an honour to be able to be part of that development of this, for the small island country. You know, we only have 16,000 people in the whole country. But, you know, services have so much more improved for these students in the outer islands, where they have online learning, Zoom calls between students and their teachers. So the quality of teaching and learning has been greatly enhanced. But another advantage for some of these, for all of our outer islands, is that they have electricity 24/7 using renewable energy, which is on all of the islands. And it's previously, they would have 6 hours of electricity a day using expensive diesel fuel. So, you know, that's been a real advantage for many of them. And at that particular time, too, I had heard, I didn't know too much about the Internet Society, and I certainly had never heard of ICANN. But I did understand that I was helping to bridge the digital divide. I did understand how important it was that these communities were able to connect and have access to communication and information services. So in 2006, I was invited to attend my first Pacific Internet conference in Samoa. And this was my introduction to the Pacific Islands chapter of the Internet Society, where I met and was inspired by no other than Cerf, who happened to be at that particular event. And he encouraged me to join the chapter for the advantages it would bring to the work I was doing in the Cook Islands. But such was my involvement, as has been mentioned. I later organised a PAC-TWNIC myself on Rarotonga in 2008, got involved with the PAC-ISOC board and ended up joining them for several years, 4 of which were spent as the board chair. But PAC-ISOC, you know, really was the start of my journey into outreach and my discovery that the connectivity, accessibility and affordability issues were not just issues for the Cook Islands, they were shared by all the islands in the Pacific. And even today, PAC-ISOC continues to bring these concerns to the attention of the Internet Society and other organisations, including the global IGF, to help to continually improve the situation of small island states in the Pacific. But after joining PAC-ISOC, I took up Internet governance courses, as you do, through the Diplo Foundation and the Internet Society, and then a fellowship with ICANN in 2010. And through these courses and events, I was regularly meeting up with with a Caribbean colleague, Tracy Hackshaw, and our shared concerns and interests about end user issues for small island states. We started attending the global IGF in 2012. I didn't actually get to all those events, but I did participate remotely and brought the Pacific concerns to the face-to-face sessions that Tracy led at the event on our behalf. And in 2018, that's when we decided we really needed to make this collaboration with the global IGF official. So we applied to become the dynamic coalition of small island developing states in the Internet Society. And our members are mainly members of our Internet Society chapters and other internet-related organisations. And we, you know, presently just jointly relay what's happening in our regions, and more specifically focusing on identifying how the internet can enhance the public interest on common issues of concern to small island states. And so that's something that's been a real enhancement for us in the Pacific. But my association with the Asia Pacific region, which I really enjoyed, originally came about with an invitation to attend my first APR-IGF meeting in Tokyo in Japan in 2012. And the APR-IGF really gave me a great introduction to Asia and a broader understanding and appreciation of its various cultures, but specifically its internet culture and the interests of internet end users within the Asian community. And as mentioned by Nicole, this was extended in 2016 when I was elected to the board of DotAsia, which really helped to heighten my understanding again of the interests of the Asian internet community through the DotAsia domain and how DotAsia has been able to enhance global interest in the Asian region by the promotion of its domain. And I'm so proud to have been associated with people such as Nicole and Edmon and others working on the board and the staff of the DotAsia organization who do a great job in their various community projects and the attention they give to the needs and interests of the Asia Pacific communities. But as mentioned, I'm currently the chair of the At-Large Advisory Committee, and it's a community, and it's community of ICANN. I'm in my fourth and final year as the chair, which has been an interesting experience, mainly virtual, but representing the interests of the global internet end users who are active members of our at-large community, and many of them belonging to either at-large structures, community organizations, or as individual members. And of course, at-large contributes inputs into the development of advice to the board as an advisory committee, but also to policy discussions on issues that relate to the DNS as they might impact internet users globally. But a lot of the work we do is very much focused on the public interest from the perspective of advancing and enhancing end user engagement in the multi-stakeholder model, by ensuring that their voices are heard at the policy discussion tables at PDPs and other working groups. The multifaceted nature of public interest is supported within at-large mainly by ordinary internet end users who do not have any commercial interest in the internet industry itself, but whose dedication and commitment is purely due to their interest in upholding the multi-stakeholder model in support of ICANN's mission. Nicole, you said 10 minutes, didn't you? So, I mean, this is, is my time up, do you think? Because I can, is that it? I was going to talk about ICANN's mission, but I don't want to go over my time.
You can still go on a little bit, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
One of the things, as I was going to mention about the ICANN's mission, it has sort of like three main areas, which I'm sure Edmond's learned about a lot since he started on the board. But it really, one of the things is it aims to be a champion of the single, open, and global interoperable internet, globally interoperable internet. And of course, this relates to the fundamental nature of the internet. It aims at being independent, trusted, multi-stakeholder steward of the internet's unique identifiers. Of course, that's the technical and policy side, which we had here. But thirdly, it aims to provide an open and collaborative environment where diverse stakeholders come together in the global public interest. And this is where our interest as the end user community pops in. I think that what the concern for us is that just going over the how the strategic goal for achieving this mission is to strengthen their bottom-up multi-stakeholder decision-making process to make sure that effective and timely decisions are made in the global public interest. That's in the next slide, actually. I don't know if you've ever participated in a PDP or even an expedited PDP, but timeliness does not seem possible when you have a multi-stakeholder factions all trying to ensure that their expectations are considered. And sometimes we sort of feel that the unbalanced composition of the membership of some of these different PDPs is a concern for us, because it usually means that ordinary internet end users get a low priority voice amongst those who have a vested interest in the outcomes of some of those decisions. In large, we're committed to growing our stakeholder participation and to ensure the sustainability of the multi-stakeholder model within ICANN and ensuring end user engagement. And in their mission and the strategies, ICANN sort of like implies and expects to actively support the work and effort that is made by our volunteers, who make up a considerable and important part of its multi-stakeholder participation model. And the pandemic and the declining population of and participation of the diversity of the voices within ICANN clearly demonstrates how fragile this model is without adequate and effective support from their volunteers. We sort of feel that they could support volunteers more along the models of other international not-for-profit organisations. But I think that one of the things that, as the chair of the ALAC, I'm putting out there is that using the words from their strategic plan, and in order to grow active, informed and effective stakeholder participation, ICANN really needs to ensure that there's more efficient and targeted support for its community-wide volunteer base, but also to do so in the best interest of the sustainability of its own self-promotion as the upholder of the end-user multi-stakeholder engagement model and as a supporter of the global public interest. I'll stop there then, Nicole. Back to you.
Okay, thank you, Maureen. Maureen has emphasized the, I think it's the connectivity and the access, especially for the small islands. Yeah, and through her participation to the Internet Society and the ICANN's public interest strategies and missions. Yeah, thank you, Maureen. Next, we will have Jeff to share some thoughts about the nature of the Internet. Jeff.
Hi, thank you, and good morning, everyone. If it's okay, I will share my screen as we go forward, which will put some context into what I'm saying. I should note that this is a very different perspective from Maureen's, extremely different. So let's have a look at some thoughts about this from a more technical and perhaps political and economic perspective. So we're talking about two questions here. What's the nature of the internet? And how can the internet follow this concept of a global public interest agenda? And I'd like to deal with them in sequence. So let's first look at what's the nature of the internet? Well, if you wind back the clock and go back to the 1980s, what emerged from the research projects at the time was incredibly easy to describe. It was a telephone network for computers. And it had about as much functionality as a telephone network. Now, if you remember the telephone networks, some of you might not, you couldn't talk to the network, you talked through the network. It was the person at the other end you talked to. And the early days of the internet, it was exactly like that. The internet was just a fabric of moving packets. Computers talked to other computers. So it was just packet transmission. Everything else was actually done by the computers attached to the network. So if you actually took a very strict definition of what was the internet, all you found were packets whizzing past. That was it. Everything else were the applications and services that were actually part of the computers connected to the internet. But that was the 1980s. these research projects escaped from the lab. They went feral. They very quickly escaped. But at the same time, the reason why they escaped from the lab is that computers escaped from the machine room. Computers became consumer goods. The early Apple IIs, the IMSI 8080s, the Commodore PETs, you know, the Ataris, etc. All of a sudden, consumers, people like you and I, were buying computers, taking them home and playing with them. Now, these computers weren't that fast, weren't that capable, and were unable to do a bunch of jobs that the old mainframes used to do. You know, these were cheap, simple devices. And so to make these computers work in a connected sense, we dropped the idea of a telephone and went to an entirely different model. We went to an architecture in the 1990s that we called client-server. And the network actually became two-sided. On the one side, there were servers, and on the other side, there were customers. And so some of those functions that used to be performed by mainframes that everyone did, everyone stopped doing it. The entire naming system was actually pulled into the network. The way we directed packets around the network was pulled into the network, the routing system. Sending messages, content, the web, services, all of those were moved away from customers and clients. And what we had instead was this massive asymmetry where, in essence, out there in consumer land, you had this changeable window where you could connect to servers. So it's, from the client's perspective, the network is no longer transparent. From the client's perspective, all those services moved into this sort of nebulous thing called the network. And if you actually look at the way the money went round, when you paid your internet service provider, as part of the network services it provided to you, provided some of these services. How they did that was actually no one's concern, but that was part of the network service. DNS, the name system, the routing system, electronic mail services, even web servers, content servers. We could build networks that were service-rich at the edge. We didn't have the technology. So instead, what we created was thin edges and pulled all the functionality that hurt into the middle of the network. So this whole thing was asymmetric. And that was kind of the 1990s. This role specialization went crazy because as we built faster pipes, more broadband and more content, more users, more, all of a sudden we had phenomenal role specialization. And if you sort of look at the network of say 20 odd years ago, what you actually see is a whole bunch of specialized activities. So in the infrastructure, it was no longer just routers and wires. There were these common concentration points that we called exchanges, where a whole bunch of transit providers met in a single building and in essence exchanged packets between them across that building floor. There were peering points, there were gateways. We ended up structuring networks. Folk who ran international circuitry and connectivity were kind of labeled as tier 1 internet service providers. And then there were regional and local and so on. So the network itself started differentiating between certain types of service providers. Most of the time, demand exceeded capacity. There was way more demand than we ever had network. And so we tried to make the network that we had stretch further. And part of this is what we call traffic engineering, to try and move and shift traffic across more parts of the network so the quality of the network wasn't overly degraded. All those servers that sat inside internet service providers, we moved them into bigger and bigger and bigger warehouses. And so we started the entire data center business because it was cheaper, easier, and more efficient. We played around with quality of service engineering to try and make folk who paid us more money have better treatment of their packets. And if you didn't pay us enough money, whoops, rationing in this new world. And we tried all kinds of revival of hybrid packet and circuitry, MPLS, VPNs, network segmentation, multi-service networks. Most of this was just marketing rubbish, but there was a real effort to try and make the internet do everything for everybody in all kinds of different ways. And when you don't have enough capacity or bandwidth, you have to resort to some kind of computer mediation to sort of synthesize outcomes. Oddly enough, we built two quite distinct networks. Customer access networks, originally in wires and DSL, then we moved in the 2000s to radio and mobiles, cellular networks. And on the other side, we started building specialized networks whose only job was to deliver data, like Netflix, like Facebook, like Google. Quite distinct networks with quite distinct engineering. So when you say right now, today, what's the nature of the internet? The problem is that, as I've just shown you in that quick tour, it isn't a constant. It's not. It keeps changing. So let's try and take another step back and go, well, what are we changing in the internet and why will we continue to change it? Well, I think users want four things: bigger, faster, better, cheaper. We've gone bigger. We've gone bigger by a factor of over 100 billion. We're now moving terabits of data. We have taken the existing copper conductors of the 1970s, shifted it to fiber cables moving. Into that single strand of doped glass. We actually now do incredibly complex link aggregation. For example, a 100 gig circuit is not 100 gigs. It's actually 4 by 25 subtly glued together to look like it's fatter. The amount of silicon and work to get there is actually really quite challenging. We're doing all kinds of content replication. When you get data from Facebook, your packets don't travel to California. God, California would melt under the pressure. Facebook is everywhere. We've actually shifted out and created all of that replicated content and aggregated it out so that the content is now close to the user. And all of this is done with massive capacity. We're doing 5G networks not because we can, it's because the existing networks are melting. We just need to move more packets. And to manage all that, there is no middle anymore. We serve from the edge. Distance is the nightmare of any network. The further away you are, the more expensive it is, and the more it costs and the slower it gets. Everyone knows this. So when we started to figure out how to make content faster, we took this massive oversupply of computation. There's oversupply of bandwidth these days, and this oversupply of shortage. We're not running out of silicon chips, quite the opposite. But what we are doing now is replicating everything at every edge. The content distribution networks don't actually distribute according to your requests. They pre-provision the content close to you just in case you ask. So if I look at the amount of distance my packets travel to deliver me my content, and here am I in Australia, most of my packets never leave the continent, never even leave the East Coast. Most of them never even go more than a few hundred kilometers in my case, and in your case, probably even less. So now all of the things I do are actually provisioned close to me. And distance, the longer it is, the slower it is, the shorter it is, the faster it is. So now my network has never been faster, never been more responsive, never been cheaper than the network we have today. Because faster is working. Better? Wow. We are now doing so much more about not telling everyone what each of us are doing. If better means more trustworthy, more secure, more privacy, we've done an enormous amount, particularly in the last 10 years. Radio made us sit up and notice. because a mobile network is telling everyone. How do you make your conversation a secret? There's no such thing as secret radio. You have to make the signal encrypted. And we've done a huge amount of work in sealing up all of the obvious leakages of data and information that travel through the internet. The privacy agenda, you'd almost say it's out of control. And the issue is now everyone encrypts. Is that network trustworthy? Let's assume it's not. But it is. Don't care. I'm going to encrypt everything no matter what. So we treat all network infrastructure as untrustable, and we don't trust it at all. That's what better means. And all of this is phenomenally cheap, and will get cheaper. Networking is not a luxury anymore. It's across all countries at all levels of GDP. There are now massive economies of scale, and this stuff doesn't cost. Google, for you and I, is free. Why is that? Because, and it does cost them a fortune, you and I don't pay, the advertiser pays. But what's the advertiser actually buying? Well, the advertiser is buying my profile. The advertiser is saying to Google, I want to deliver ads to Jeff because he's part of a demographic that will buy this favorite, whatever it is. They pay Google to send me ads. Now, I could try as Jeff to say, hi, here's my profile of what I want to buy. If anyone wants to sell me that, send me money and we'll do a deal. Just like Google does. As Jeff, I can't do that. I can't monetize my profile. I can't monetize my future purchasing decisions, but Google does. And Google is so successful at this, and Facebook, and Amazon, which has now become basically an advertising network, that they pay for all of this service by monetizing what I can't monetize. I'm not paying. This is free. A former luxury service that in the university sector where I work, buying computers was a painful process of millions and millions of dollars. Networking was an undreamt of luxury. Is now a mass market commodity, totally mass market, and it is free in most services. I don't pay for search. Millions of machines all over the planet work like crazy. Every time I put in a search term, I'm not paying. Wow, we have made this so cheap. So it's all good, right? Why are we talking? This is all fantastic. Well, there's a couple of little problems. What is the network these days? Because if most of the packets and most of the content travels through private content distribution networks, where's the public network? Where's transit? Where's peering? Where's gateways? They're valueless and irrelevant. In the last 5 years, we've been ripping them out. The money has gone. It's yesterday's business. Well, if it's all yesterday's business and all we're doing is network address translation, content distribution, and cloud service, who cares about unique IP addresses? That's a good question. Who does care? Well, unfortunately, I don't know. We've actually pushed the glue of the internet out of addresses, out of packets, out of transmission. All that's left is the domain name system. You're on the same network as I am, only because we agree to use the same name infrastructure. And that's it. That's the only definition of the internet. It's just a common referential space for symbols. The rest were privatized and taken off the table. So what's the internet today? Transmission? Nah. Packets? Nah. Addresses? Nah. Just a common namespace. And that namespace is only used in the context of delivery of content and service and not much else. So I could use a cloud provider like Cloudflare. I can put my content there and I can say, deliver this named content, www. something. And in Australia, my packets will go to address 1.2.3.4, whatever. In Taiwan, the same content will be delivered from a different endpoint using a different address. And in England, different again. America, different again. What's common? Just the name. That's the only thing that defines the glue now. So the internet's only a namespace. So what's the nature of the internet? It's the DNS. Like it or lump it, that's where we are. Everything else we've managed to de-factor. We've managed to get it off the table and turn it into irrelevance. It just doesn't matter. So now the tricky question, the global public interest agenda. And I'm going to take an entirely different spin from Maureen on this one, because it's hard to tell what public interest is when there's no public communications infrastructure to talk about. What protocol does Google use to ship the data? I don't know. They won't tell me. Or you, or anyone else who doesn't work for Google. What does Facebook use, or Meta, or Amazon, or Microsoft? It's all private. There's no open shared network worth a damn. All of that public stuff we did collapsed. And it collapsed into these private distribution systems built according to their rules, their technology, their approach. And it's private. They're not shared. Who's building submarine cables? Not the telcos. They stopped 10 years ago. Google's building them. Amazon's building them. Meta and Microsoft are building them. They're all private. Every last one. Oh, God. Maybe we should look up into the sky. Oops. 4,000 satellites launched by Elon Musk and Starlink. You'd say, well, that's a monopoly. Well, you'd probably be right until you figure out that Amazon's about to launch its own constellation. Captured. Completely captured. So where's public? It's gone. But let's get down to the real question. Who cares? And that's almost the very hard question, because nobody cares. Once you have a service that's fast, cheap, and if you think about Starlink for a second, ubiquitous, every place on the planet, including ocean surface, you can do this. So if we have a commodity that's fast, that's cheap, that's ubiquitous, that's affordable, what's the problem? What is the public interest problem we're trying to solve? And that's a very difficult question to answer. What we've done when we deregulated this enterprise, this sector, this activity, is that we handed it to private investment, to private enterprise, to the Googles, to the Amazons and so on, right? They're not there to uphold anybody's public interest, not America's, not Taiwan, not anybody's, not Australia's. They don't care. That is the job of governments. But the corollary is, if governments want to shape the interest, they have to spend the money. Because once you get these massive multinationals, what's the national interest they represent? Themselves, their own interest. So when you deregulate this industry, as we did in 1980, when we ripped apart the national telco monopolies and pulled apart all the regulatory strictures that kept them inside each geographic boundary, each political boundary, when we ripped that apart, largely based on American politics, but that's a different talk. When we ripped it apart, you need to have supreme confidence that the motives of the private sector investors that you're bringing in coincide with the public interest. Now, in America, the real issue was they hated AT&T so much by 1980. AT&T were price gouging. They were holding the entire country back. They were ripping everybody off. And the attitude at the time was anything's better than AT&T. So deregulation was actually a negation of where they were. There was very little forward looking at what we were building. But the problem is that once you deregulate, it is astonishingly hard to back out of it. You can't reverse. It's an irrevocable step. There's this old joke. We used to make it about Microsoft. Then we made it about Google. And we're still making it about, Meta and Apple and Google and Amazon. How do you negotiate with a 900-pound gorilla? And the answer is you can't. You don't. They're bigger than you. Out of the top 10 public enterprises on this planet, 8 of them are IT behemoths. And the other 2 are fellow travelers. And the issue is Once you pass this entire global communications endeavour to this market-based private sector regime, it has its own agenda and it's not yours. It's definitely not yours, it's theirs. And it's outside any form of national regulatory control. Just ask the poor old EU, trying desperately hard to rein in aspects of data privacy, aspects of foreign control over their infrastructure. And their results, ineffectual. Their ability to try and curb it, nonsensical. It's all just window dressing because the underlying dynamics are way bigger than them. How do you negotiate with a 900-pound gorilla? You don't. You just come to terms with it. And where we are now is coming to terms with what we've collectively done over the last 2 decades. Yes, it's fast. Yes, it's cheap. Yes, it's ubiquitous. Yes, it's amazing. But you're just a visitor. It's not yours. You don't own it. You're just a visitor. Thank you. I'll hand it back with that rather dull and gloomy look at where we are now. Thanks a lot.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. Indeed, it is an extremely different point of view from Marine's presentation. In Jeff's presentation, he raised the issues that the nature of the internet keeps changing, and and a couple of questions have been raised. What is the public interest? And most of the times, private enterprise are not there to uphold the public interest. So, Jeff also mentioned about the importance of DNS. So now we have Edmon. Yeah, in the opening speech, Edmon has introduced the Internet multiple stakeholders model. It is very important. I would like to have Edmon to do some expanding about your presentation and give some feedback and interact with the tool presentation, especially for the Jeff's technical point of view. Edmon, thank you.
Certainly. Thank you, Nicole. I will try to take the task of reconciling the very different perspectives from Maureen and Jeff. I guess that is part of my job. And well, I think Jeff brings up a few really good points. The internet really developed from supposedly a more distributed concept to a centralized, more centralized concept where it's a client-server model, and then it grew into an edge model. It looks like it went back into a distributed model, but no, wait a minute. That distribution is done by certain, big platforms rather than the distribution that we originally see. And that is certainly the general direction. And this relates to a few things that I often talk about. One is these privately owned public spaces. I talk about it in terms of the platforms like Facebook and Google and so on. But when you look at the network space that Jeff talks about, that is happening as well. These are supposedly public spaces that are now being completely privately owned and organized. How do we then think about the global public interest? And that, I think, is the part where I find consolation that Jeff said that the DNS is still relevant. The internet is now the DNS now. That is both interesting and dangerous, because then everything is going to be pointed at ICANN. So all the internet's problem is going to be ICANN's problem. Wait a minute. So, but that being said, that brings us to, I guess, Maureen's point of view, as in, if the network doesn't matter to the user, the global public interest still matters, but maybe in a different form. And how we deal with it is probably going to be much more challenging, as Jeff mentioned, because they're in multinational hands because they're beyond a particular national jurisdiction, and therefore the regular political or regulatory frameworks will not work. I mean, they're beyond the, what should I say? They're beyond the control or clause of our, democratic or non-democratic, where unfortunately some places control. And that's also an interesting thing because I think governments are also seeing that and they're recognizing that problem. And therefore, part of what I talked about in my opening speech is the inclination towards protection. They want to protect their turf, but their turf is actually has already moved on, as Jeff mentioned. But I guess back to this particular forum, at least focusing on the DNS and nothing else, there is still a part where where I think it's relevant, and I think this forum and the ICANN work remains relevant, so that at least the last part of the internet that is somewhat competitive and somewhat publicly governed is under ICANN, which is the naming function and the DNS. And there, I'll expand a little bit on some of what Maureen mentioned and the public interest, the global public interest framework. If the DNS is important, then we at least should start working on continue to work on good governance around the DNS. In the future, at least we know one thing for sure: it will continue to change. Whether it will change to the better or change to the worse, we won't know. But at least for the governance side of things, that's why part of my opening speech is also, we need to build out ICANN well, to have it become an exemplary platform for governance into the future. And that's my view. And that's where the GPI, the Global Public Interest Framework, comes into play. I think it is a very elusive concept, as Jeff and I guess many others have mentioned. We used to think at ICANN that the multi-stakeholder model and the output or the process through the multi-stakeholder model itself would produce an end result that is automatically considered in the global public interest. I think previous challenges to some of those policies or positions that were created have told us that that's probably not enough. When there's a challenge towards what actually is or is not in global public interest, there probably needs to be more robust mechanism to identify that the community and the policy-making bodies have taken into consideration different aspects of the global public interest. And I think that's what ICANN is working very hard on. In fact, just to let people know, there is a GPI framework. It's called the Global Public Interest Framework, basically, and it maps certain elements of policies to the ICANN bylaws, which and the objectives, the mission that Maureen introduced a little bit earlier, and how we could then look at it as a framework or a toolkit to consider whether certain policies are within the global public interest or not. I think that is an important evolution for ICANN work. And currently, the framework is being it's kind of an operationalizing the concept of a global public interest, and the framework is being piloted with the work in the what is called the SAD, which is in response to the WHOIS and the GDPR, the global, the general privacy regulation. I sometimes forget. Data privacy regulation. Yes, general data privacy regulation from some EU.
GDPR.
Yeah, GDPR.
Yeah.
And So this is one step. I think at least the DNS community is trying to stick around in terms of the and also to build on the governance. And I would close my little intervention here by saying that I think the DNS itself is also not so. It is also under attack at all times. Some people talk about the metaverse and the blockchains of domain systems that are overtaking the ICANN system. I think that therein lies a part where Jeff's presentation is a caution. Why we want to keep this in relatively public hands is something that I think all users need to pay attention to. And as we work on policies, that's why, we would try, it's important to try to get people to come to ICANN and think about the policies with a global public interest perspective.
Okay, thank you, Edmon. In Edmon's feedback, actually, I have some experience that in the past few years, we can see the attitude, the changing attitude from the government. Because I used to be the regulator and work in the government. In the past, they have no idea about the multiple stakeholder model and used to and are familiar with the top-down model. But I think in the past few years, they have already known that the nature of the internet is totally different from the mechanism they have used in the past. And the other thing is the new technologies challenges. There's some very controversial issues. So maybe within these 2 days, we have other topics discussed in the forum. Now we have Professor Wolfgang. In your opening speech, you have introduced the waves of internet development. And right now, there are two different kind of internet. One is democracy and another is autocracy. And I think, would you like to extending more about your speech and interact with the presentation of Marine and Jeff, especially for the Marine's presentation of ICANN's framework about the regulation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I was also impressed by the presentations from Marine and Jeff, because they gave different perspectives. And they raised, in my eyes, also the questions we have discussed for decades about the interrelationship between technology and policy. And Jeff has mentioned regulation. And the question is then what type of regulation? So because we have, let's say, a permanent I would not say conflict, but different approaches taken by code makers and by lawmakers. So from Larry Lessig, we know from the 1990s that in cyberspace, code is law. So the question in the 19th century, it was the lawmakers which created the space for engineers. But now the code makers are creating the space for the lawmakers. So they, with their inventions, they create spaces which then lawmakers have to step in and to find a way, how to regulate or to deregulate it. I think this is a problem which will be with us also for the next decade or for the next 25 years. So the communication between code makers and lawmakers is unfortunately on a low level. And if we want to move forward and to reach progress, we have to enhance the communication among the technical people and the policy people, because as I said, we have this one world, one internet philosophy on the one hand, which is more the philosophy of the technical people. And then we have the one world, one 193 jurisdictions on the other side, which is the world of the policy people. And this intersects in a moment or in reality, as Jeff has pointed out. So you mentioned in my introduction that I was a member of the UN Working Group on Internet Governance appointed by Kofi Annan in the year 2004 and 5, when the World Summit on the Information Society wanted to figure out, how the internet should be governed. And so the mandate of the group was to come up with a definition what internet governance is. And so our working definition finally made its way into the TWNIC agenda, which was adopted by 193 member states of the United Nations. So the elements of the definitions are really interesting. Some people have this forgotten. The first thing is, it was said, governance of the internet cannot be done by one stakeholder alone. So it cannot be done by governments only, but it cannot be done by private sector only. So you need all stakeholders on one table. So, and that would be my question to Jeff then, when he says, when he spoke about the deregulation in the 1980s, and it's now everything controlled by the private sector and you cannot reverse. It's not ours, it's there. And so that means how Jeff would see the interaction, the role of governments, whether after the wave of deregulation, should we move into a phase of re-regulation, and how realistic it is. Jeff said, the European Union wants to take the lead, but this is just unrealistic. This is an illusion that the European Commission could become the rule maker for the global internet. Even GDPR and all the other new legislation act. What will be the future with them? And this would be my question to Jeff. But the other key element of the definition was that we made this distinction between the development and the use of the internet. And these are the two main layers. That is the ground layer, the development of the internet. This is more or less the technical infrastructure, and the use of the internet. This is where the real problems are, the internet-related public policy problems. And this is where the public interest is relevant both on the application layer, but also on the ground layer, because the ground layer produces what I call always, the air of the internet, which you need. So when Jeff said it's cheap, it's ubiquitous, and it's fast, and so on, you take it for granted that you have it, like the air. But in the real air, there is no Chinese air, there is no American air. We have polluted air or fresh air. And I think this is an important point. And just recently, when we did see the letter from the Ukraine minister to ICANN to remove zone files for top-level domains from Russia, .su and .rf in Cyrillic from the root, ICANN was confronted with a complicated question, because I said, okay, if we would do this, we would pollute the air. And this would be fight back. So the answer from ICANN was very clear and said, okay, we support Ukraine. We give you $1 million to rebuild your infrastructure, but we do not follow your request and take out RU and RF zone files from the root, because this is a neutral infrastructure. And it would be very dangerous if we would start to politicize this. I would say to pollute the internet air. This would fire back to everybody, and this would ruin everybody. So, and I think to make this distinction between the development of the internet, I'll use the technical layer, and the application layer, where we have all the political problems. I think this is really important, and this was important already in 2005 when there was the World Summit, but it's even more important in the future, as we see in this Ukraine case. The problem is when also Jeff said, okay, at the end of the day, it's the DNS. And Edmon reacted and said, okay, be careful. This would bring ICANN back in the line of fire. When the internet is the DNS, then ICANN becomes the target of all these political problems. That's why Yuan Marby from ICANN said, okay, be careful, we are doing technical internet governance. So this has nothing to do with all the political battles you have around cybersecurity and all digital trade or something like that. So, or content, things like that. So ICANN is not the content police of the internet. So to have this differentiated approach and to make these distinctions is important. On the other hand, everything is linked to everything. So, and here is where you have a problem. So I would stop here and probably Jeff or Maureen can react to my question about the options for real regulation and how realistic it will be that we get some of the, let's say, big corporations under a reasonable control, not to stifle innovation, not to introduce, let's say, control in the sense of censorship, but to bring a certain reasonable order which would then protect the public interest in a way that all sides can benefit from this wonderful infrastructure.
Okay, yeah, great. Thank you, Professor Wolfgang. Yeah, now we are happy to have Maureen coming back. Yeah, so the connectivity is quite important, right? Yeah. Okay, so now the questions goes to Jeff and Maureen, and yeah, other panelists are welcome to jumping in for discussion. Yeah, Jeff.
Thanks, Wolfgang. These are fascinating questions. I actually see re-regulation happening, but I doubt about how effective it will be. As Apple said before a US Congress hearing, when an erstwhile congressman said, "Where exactly is your tax domicile? In which country does Apple pay corporate taxation?" And the answer was silence. If you can't even get these companies to pay corporate taxation somewhere, why does anyone believe that you can do national regulation to curb their behaviours? They are far more agile than the old, Westphalian nation states have ever been able to do, and it's getting worse. Part of the issue is, as we saw with roads and rail and even the telephone, when we created common platforms, yes, there was money to be made, but the platform was a wealth creator for others. It was a tool that you could use to build your own business, create your own national wealth. It allowed society to develop in all kinds of ways with a more efficient way of moving goods, of communicating. But the internet, we've gone one step further. It's not a platform that enables wealth creation. As we're seeing in the trade war and the technology trade war between China and the US, this is becoming a platform that controls wealth creation. And that's a very subtle twist, but a very, very important one. Because once the platform has an attitude, once the platform is owned, once there's IPR, once there's gating conditions, once the only way I make money via Google's platform is if Google lets me and is happy with me doing that, then all of a sudden, everything has changed and it's not for the better. And the platform that we've built in the internet these days is being built is one that actually controls those aspects of wealth creation in a way that we've never seen before. So there's no longer the neutrality of the platform and the shared common infrastructure. Now, this makes every government extraordinarily nervous. And of course, the reaction from a legislator is to legislate. It doesn't matter whether it works or not. It's just their job. That's the only tool they have in their tool set. They will legislate. The issue comes, though, how effective is it? I would like to bring up the unfortunate case of Quad9, the DNS provider, headquartered in Switzerland, brought before a German court for providing resolution for names that lead you to sites that do intellectual property theft, you know, movie sites, whatever. And you go, but What9's tiny. Why wasn't Google prosecuted? Google is a US company that wasn't a signatory to the Lugano Convention. Google goes, I don't care. There's always a loophole somewhere. Once you're that big and all embracing, you find a convenient vehicle and drive a truck through the hole. The efforts to try and regulate this space and try and bring back a neutral platform that allow everyone access to create their own wealth are closing up as we speak. The centrality that's happening is all embracing. And this is extraordinarily difficult to counter. All of that seed money, all these efforts to create new venture capital funds in other parts of the world, to create new forms of technology, and to be perfectly frank, the national efforts of China as an entire country to lift themselves up and actually create a competitive force against this almost virtual monopoly of these US-based enterprises has so far proved to be startlingly ineffectual. You know, I look at that trade war with some dismay, because if they can't, who can? And if we honestly thought in a deregulated world that competition provides the necessary thrust to keep everyone on their toes, to actually erase monopolies by creating competitive forces that erode them, then competition, at least in the year 2022, is letting us down. It's not doing what we demand of it and rely on happening. And I'm kind of bereft of good ideas as to how to instill back some counterforce to this inexorable centrality, this absolute control over not just the experience, but control over the platform itself and control over who creates wealth and how. And that's the bit that I must admit I find deeply disturbing. And this is well beyond ICANN and the domain name system. Although I do note the number of folk who provide domain name services, who hosts your name, is now down to 5, and it will probably be 3. At some point, who controls ICANN? Is it GoDaddy or everyone else? Because if all the names are with GoDaddy, what's the debate? What's left? And we're going to have this in sector after sector after sector. Content distribution networks, even content streaming. You know, once you get a small number of folk in a cartel situation, it's extremely hard to pull that back. So the legislators will legislate whether they're going to be effectual or not. Maybe it's just a rainy Thursday in Australia, but I am deeply pessimistic about this. I don't believe they will actually manage to gain traction with the scope of the problem that we've built. So sorry to be so depressing, but, you know, thanks.
Yes, thank you, Jeff. I think no matter what kind of issues and the point of view from what kind of any aspect, I think regulatory issue will be the very big one. Okay, and Edmon, would you like to respond? Yeah.
Yeah, just I guess a quick response. In fact, I share some of the pessimism that Jeff has mentioned. However, I even want to say, however, is that you know, on the other side, I think I see a movement because of people like Jeff who are, you know, sounding the alarm well enough. I think there is an undercurrent from especially younger generation in terms of movement, and we're talking about. And in my case, I mean, my personal view is that yes, Jeff, you're probably right. The lawmakers is not going to make this work. It will take a global social movement to turn it around, and I think that is certainly in my mind, and that's, you know, part of part of the opening speech I talk about. Engaging the youth in terms of internet governance and understanding the space and what it is, and talking about it as a movement. I do believe that, yes, it will take a global movement to turn things around. But I am pessimistic with the current direction. but that doesn't mean there's nothing that can be done. I believe this is probably part of the way, at least to sow the seeds or make sure and that people know about it. And I think I think what Jeff mentioned is very important, but at the same time, we should never lose hope.
Okay, Marine, are you there? Yeah, maybe Marine's internet dropped because the rain is affecting her satellite dish's connection. So I think she's trying to get back. Yeah. Okay, although I still have questions, but I think we need to reserve the 10 minutes, open the floor, to the question. Are there any questions from our audience, no matter online or remotely?
We would like to invite the participants to please raise your questions if you have any. For our on-site participants, if you have any questions, please simply come forward and use the 2 microphone stand to ask your questions. For our participants online, you're welcome to speak directly, or you can also put your question or leave your questions in the chat box, and we will collect the questions and invite the panelists to answer. Is there any questions from the floor or from online?
Yeah. I will encourage our audience to just go to the microphone. Okay. In the meantime, okay, I will raise another questions. I think from governance, interoperation, and users' interest, should we keep the internet an open architecture but hierarchy operation as believed to fulfill the global interest? Yeah. Who can interact the question? Professor Wolfgang.
Yeah, may I make a comment what Edmon said, and I try probably to cover also your question. I think I share Edmon's approach that he said, hope is low. And he shares partly the pessimism of Jeff, and if you are getting older, then you see, you see a skepticism, but you see also some growing hope in the future. And, my argument for many years now is that cyber stability is as important as climate change. And what I see when when Edmon says, that it needs a new social movement. So I think the Friday for Future movement has changed the public opinion. And I think now all governments and all corporations, take the challenges of climate change much more serious and say this is in the public interest. And, a lot of this, young girls and boys who are demonstrating on Friday for Future, say take the internet for granted. If Facebook collapses for 3 hours, then suddenly, that is a catastrophe. So, and they are fighting against the catastrophe of climate change, but they are not really aware that a bigger catastrophe could happen if the whole, if the stability in cyberspace is not there anymore. And insofar, what I'm arguing for is a Cyber for Future movement, not only Friday for Future, but Cyber for Future, because, that if they realize that an open, interoperable, free, democratic internet is important for their future of the next generation, then they will ask questions which also to the corporations, not only to governments, stop censorship, stop surveillance, but they will also questions to corporations, which pollute, let's say, the cyberspace, with their narrow-minded commercial interests. And the beauty of the multi-stakeholder model is that it includes civil society in the governance model. So if it's just, let's say, a public-private partnership, if big government and big business go together, this would end in tyranny. So that means the multi-stakeholder model really brings all groups to the table. And I think this is the way forward. And there is certainly a need from the community to explain it better, because, you know, now multi-stakeholder approach is used as a lip service by many groups, which say, that's fine, we have a seat on the table and that's okay. But the real things are happening elsewhere and moving in a direction Jeff has mentioned. So, again, I share partly his pessimism. So, but if you want to have some hope on the horizon, then you should say, okay, cyber for future, next generation, and a multi-stakeholder approach. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Wolfgang. As you mentioned in your presentation, your opening speech, that the best case scenario is the cooperation. Yeah, and I like Edmon's hope is slow. Yeah, that is why I introduced you as the the social innovator and the entrepreneur. Okay, Maureen, you have come back. Would you like to say something about the maybe deregulation or the multiple stakeholder model? Yeah, extending some thoughts.
Thank you, Nicole. I hope you can hear me. I'm sort of like on my mobile phone at the moment, because the broadband's gone. But I've just sort of captured bits and pieces, of course, of the conversation, you know, as I've been dropping in and out. But I sort of think, you know, I know that this is a very technical conference, and you know, and I can understand the sort of like the information, and always admire the work that Jeff and Wolfgang do. But at the same time, I think from an end user perspective, you know, like really, we feel let down if the techies aren't making the internet work when we want it to work. And you know, so I think that, you know, for an end user, for an ordinary end user, especially the end users within at large, for example, you know, they're many of them don't have, like, I'm not a techie, you know, and I sort of, you know, I always say, like, I can turn my computer on and I can get connected to the internet if it's working. But at the same time, our interest is, you know, like, I mean, how do these sort of like, how does the technical sort of like side of the internet impact people who don't know how it works? They just want to know that it works, and when they need to use it. And I think that that's the reason why within at large we've got a whole lot of people who aren't technically minded and don't know much about how the internet works. But they do know that the impact of it when things go wrong, and they want to actually bring that notice and their concerns and interests to those communities. And that multi-stakeholder model allows them to actually interact with all the different sort of like stakeholders, and somebody must be able to listen. So that's just a personal perspective anyway. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Maureen. I want to check that is there any friend come to microphone?
Is there any questions from the floor? We don't have any questions from the floor at the moment.
Okay, and how about the online audience? I haven't found any question. Okay, so we have 1 minute left. Okay, that's great. Would you like to say a few words? Yeah, simple sentence about the topic. Yeah, okay. Edmon first. Yeah.
Certainly. No, I think the global public interest for the on the internet is an important topic and a bit elusive. I really take to heart Jeff's prophetic caution and alert to us, and I think, you know, it really needs this generation to start working on it for the, you know, to break up some of those monopolizing situations.
Okay, Maureen, I would have you first because I'm scared that your internet will drop again. Yeah, Maureen. Oh, you are in mute. Your microphone.
I really appreciate it. Thank you, Nicole, for reminding me. I've really appreciated hearing the other speakers and their perspectives. And as Jeff said, the end user perspective is always going to be different from those who are working in that industry. And I just appreciate being involved, being allowed to participate in this discussion anyway. So thanks, guys.
Thank you. And Jeff?
Look, my job is to ring the alarm bell. But in the words of the Australian Prime Minister, I don't drive the fire truck. Something is desperately wrong. I think we'd all appreciate that we've really built ourselves into a corner here. But it's not my job to fix it. Oddly enough, it's the audience, it's actually an entire generation who's going to have to deal with this problem. And the one thing you have to remember is the internet is not chiseled in granite. It's a conversation and it's what we build. When I first got into this in the 1980s, we knew everyone who was working in this space. Technology was a negotiation, a conversation between peers. It was truly a multi-stakeholder, although a much smaller breadth of folk, but it was a conversation. When technology is its most effective, it's a conversation. It's not a delivered product. The more you treat the internet as a delivered product, the more you're going to get treated as an undistinguished consumer. It will be what you wanted, and you're not going to like that. You're going to have to assert a voice in this place to actually treat the internet as a negotiable thing, express your desires and try and fulfill them in your terms. Because if you can turn this back into a conversation, there might be hope. But, like I said, that's not my job. Like Scott Morrison in Australia, I'm just ringing the bell. Someone else can drive the fire truck and hold the hose and put out the fire. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. We have read your articles, to ring about the bell. Yeah, okay. And Professor Wolfgang, yeah.
Cyber for future. That's it.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, due to the time limit, the section needs to end now. Thank you for our distinguished panelists. Thank you for your time and for your sharing your insight with all of us. I think the connectivity, sustainability, cooperation, and the communication, will keep us go forward to the next era of internet. Thank you, and thank you all the audience. Yeah, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Thank you very much, Ms. Nicole Chang, for moderating the session for us. And thank you to all the panelists for this very animated discussion. Ladies and gentlemen, we will now take a break. The afternoon session will start at 1:45 Taiwan time. There will be 2 parallel tracks this afternoon. Track 1 on policy will be held here at Banquet Hall 1, whereas track 2 on technical aspects will be held at Banquet Hall 3. Please be back by 1:45 Taiwan time. In the meantime, we would like to invite our participants to scan the QR code and help us fill out a questionnaire. Your feedback is highly appreciated. For our on-site participants, the QR code is at the back of your badge. For our online participants, the QR code should be found in the link in the chat. Thank you very much for your cooperation and see you in the afternoon.
As a reminder, please return your simultaneous translation headset to our reception desk because we will not offer simultaneous translation for the afternoon sessions. Be sure to return your simultaneous translation headset and get back your ID. Thank you.